Welcome to The Detail. I'm your host, Cathy Antunes, and you are listening to The Detail on WSLR 96.5 LPFM in Sarasota, Florida. And we are going to be posting this on YouTube, so you may be watching us. With me today is Dave Gulliver. Dave Gulliver lives in Sarasota County. He's a longtime investigative journalist who now works in the private sector. Dave, you did work for the Herald Tribune. And you have two children in public school, or one I think just graduated or is about to
No,
graduate.
they're both seniors.
Okay. Oh,
Graduating
you
in
have
2 months.
twins. Okay. Um, yeah, and you actually did spend some time teaching at a charter school, so we may get to that. Um, the topic today, we're going to be unpacking the application to Sarasota County schools by Charter Schools USA. Um, or actually, there's the Florida Charter Education Foundation, and we'll talk about that, for a new school they're calling it the Sarasota Preparatory Classical Academy. And this application came in mid-December, but the public only got a look at it relatively recently, less than 2 weeks ago. So it's a 600-page application. There are a lot of alarm bells ringing for Sarasota County parents, teachers. Is it wise to approve this application? And we're also going to talk about the new dynamic in the state of Florida where charter schools can appeal if they don't get approved. And there's now a state commission set up by Manny Diaz and Governor DeSantis in the legislature where charter schools can appeal. And if they get approved, the local school board can be on the hook for their legal fees for the appeal. So
Great.
That being said, Dave, thank you so much for joining me.
Yeah, my pleasure. It's great to be here, Cathy.
Okay, and this is an over 600-page application. So
Yes.
it is huge. As you said, I kept finding stuff. I have not gone through it all. And you keep finding stuff. So we're going to say right off the bat, we're not claiming to have a comprehensive review here. There's just not enough time for that. And that's one of the issues that we've encountered and people are talking about in the community. But I want to kick it off with, this is some research. You can find this on the state elections website. So these are the contributions made from the Division of Elections by Charter Schools USA to different PACs and candidates over the years. So they started contributing around the mid-90s. And you can see Richard Corcoran got money from them. The Republican Party has received many contributions from Charter Schools USA. Manny Diaz, you can see he's now the Commissioner of Education. He's a former executive with Academica, which is a charter school corporation like Charter Schools USA.
There's Joe Gruters right there.
Yeah, whereas
right up the top.
There he is, right at the top of the screen. You see Joe Gruters has gotten contributions. Yeah. So just scrolling down here again, Manny Diaz. Lots and lots of organizations and candidates and the Republican Party of Florida who have received contributions. There's Trey Traviesa, who's now in consulting work. His name came up with Jefferson County consulting contract, which is being looked at by a federal grand jury. Anyway, the total amount is about $2.5 million. So Charter Schools USA has contributed $2.5 million over the years, the last decade or so, to local, Florida candidates. So now I'm going to the overview of the application for Sarasota Classical Preparatory Academy. The highlights are mine. So just so everybody knows, these are my highlights. This is the overview summary. It was actually finished February 5th, but again, Sarasota County citizens and different interested parties, the press, all that, didn't get to see this until about 2 weeks later. So it would have been helpful, and I think there's an opportunity for more transparency with charter school application processes. But it was received December 13th. And it's actually, see, we always hear about Charter Schools USA, but it's actually the Florida Charter Education Foundation, which is applying. And you pointed this out, Dave. I know you've looked into them, that organization. Can you share what you found about them?
Yeah, I think the real issue here is how intertwined FCEF, Florida Charter Educational Foundation, and SCUSA are. And as we talk today, I'm no longer on the staff of a newspaper, but I'm going to be talking about things as if I were, things, questions I would be asking. Some of this is, speculation on my part, it's opinion, but these are the sort of leads I would be trying to follow, the threads I'd be pulling as we work on this. And as you look at this, the applicant is technically, the one applying for the school is FCEF. When you look at who signed the application, it's the 4 board members of FCEF and 6 officers of SCUSA, or CSUSA, Charter Schools USA. These 2 groups are really deeply intertwined, and we can get into that. That's been taking a lot of my time. There's so much information here that just keeps leading me in different directions. But FCEF, 4 officers. 2 of them seem to have, fairly legitimate education backgrounds, a former principal and I believe a district superintendent. One is a lobbyist for some level of higher education here in Florida. I don't have it right in front of me in the notes. One person is a banker, and the chair is a person named Valora Cole, who is a Christian minister from Tampa with her husband. And on their website it says they are co-pastors at a church. They've written 23 books. They've preached all over the country and all over the world. And just, I'll say up front, I was born and raised Catholic. I went to Catholic schools. I'm an officer. I have been an officer here at a church in town. So, I consider myself Christian, but
Actually, so have I. I was an officer in town.
Good.
And I was raised Catholic, yeah. Yep.
But, we have a fundamental, goes back to the founding of this country, a separation between church and state in this country. And, when the chair of FCEF is an ordained minister, I believe, a minister, who, her bio is very strongly, religious, almost, evangelical.
Well, she says she's a prophetic voice.
A cutting-edge prophetic voice who is internationally known for her ability to ascend into the heavens with an extraordinary anointing to exhort and accurately release prophetic decrees and declarations. That's a lot, Again, as a Christian, I'm fine with churches. I'm fine with ministers. I believe, but that's a very powerful statement of faith. And when you say something like that, it's hard to believe that Florida Charter Educational Foundation is non-ideological. You would think that the organization has to have a Christian bent if your chair is, is that strong about their religion. This is something I would follow.
Yeah, I want to jump in with that because there are questions that have been raised by the review committee in Sarasota County that looked at this application, because the classical model that they're talking about is heavy on virtues. And, how do you measure achieving those virtues? Number one. Number two, they do interviews of high school students, and there's a question of, and so what if the beliefs of one of your students don't conform with, what you're teaching, right? In terms
Right.
of beliefs. So I did want to share, because the person who we're looking at here her name is Valora Cole. Okay, so this was an op-ed piece written by Ms. Cole. Charter schools are making a positive difference. And I just want to go down to her this claim right here, where on last paragraph, second to last paragraph, she writes, charter schools very often outperform their district counterparts, but those statistics mean nothing unless you look behind the numbers. I agree. It's not easy to look behind the numbers. If a charter school outperforms a district school, that simply means that the students at that charter school achieved more than their peers at the district. This gives the district an opportunity to look at its practices and find ways to improve. It can be a win-win for all stakeholders. So the assumption in her paragraph, which she never says, is that the students are performing better because of the school, because the school is actually doing a better job.
Mhm.
And I'm going to get into this later, but Charter Schools USA so far in Sarasota County is applying and or choosing to open in areas and have students where there are fewer economically disadvantaged students, and they're largely white.
Right.
And one of the things, the widespread criticisms of charter schools, is they cherry pick their kids.
Mhm.
And if you have an inherently, a student population that you've chosen that's going to perform better, that better performance can have absolutely nothing to do with the school. You've just chosen kids that are going to do better.
Right.
And if the charter schools wanted to show that they're actually better, they would be providing data for performance that is adjusted for economic status. And I say
Right.
economic status because that is the number one predictor of reading scores and academic performance. So
Yeah.
right there, for an educator, for somebody who's in education, to make that kind of an assumption in an op-ed sets off alarm bells for me that you're selling. And I know selling.
Mm.
Because that's what I did that for many years. I would not make that kind of an assumption. Of course, I sold medications, and I would have been called out on it. And Ms. Cole here is making an unfounded assumption that she should actually have to prove. And she should show the data, because this education foundation, it's the Florida Charter Education Foundation, should be required, as well as Charter Schools USA, to actually demonstrate that they're adding value beyond choosing a student population that's going to perform better. So,
Right.
I think we need to rely on our school board to require that. That's not
Yeah.
easy to do in this environment. So anyway,
No, and
yeah,
education data is one of the, there's such a wealth of education data, and yet it's still really, really hard to get at just how effective schools are. I've done research projects on this in the past, and what you really need to do is show not just how the students are performing, but whether they're improving. And the school has to show that they're improving. And ideally, you've got some sort of control group where you compare similar students in the public schools to the charter schools, and they're simply not providing that. And
Mhm.
they're not being asked to provide it either, which is frustrating. I think one of the things to be thinking about here is, I mentioned before how intertwined these two groups are, that the applicants on this for classical prep, I'm going to call it classical prep because we also have classical academy in Sarasota, which I'm sure we're going to get to later.
And
Um,
they're using the classical
yeah,
academy dress, and that's
yeah,
huge. Okay, so
yeah.
yeah.
But again, speaking as someone who's a reporter, one of the things I would be trying to untangle here what is FCEF, Florida Charter Educational Foundation.
Mhm.
And as far as we know, we have these four people who are the board members, and that's about all we know. And the applicants are the four of them and six officers of Charter Schools USA, CSUSA, including their number two officer for the entire corporation, the head of their Florida operations. And the two of them are just very, very deeply intertwined. I keep saying that. I'm scrolling through some of my notes over here. If you pull FCF's tax return, since it's a charity, it has to file IRS Form 990, which is a public record. And there's a line in there where the tax filer has to say where its financial books are kept. And it literally says that CSUSA keeps its financials. State the name, address, telephone number of the person possessing the organization's books and records. Charter Schools USA Incorporated, 800 Corporate Drive, Fort Lauderdale, Florida, which is CSUSA. They used to have the same address, at least according to Wikipedia, the two groups. They do not anymore. Further down in the tax return for FCEF, two of its three highest paid vendors list the same address as CSUSA, a company providing its database and a company providing, its facilities management. They're both at CSUSA's address. The other top vendor is basically an arm of one of the textbook publishers. So, basically operations are CSUSA. We have six of the applicants on there. Six of the people signing the application are CSUSA. FCF operates 11 schools in Florida. When we say operates, and this is another thing that's interesting, and I would have to look harder at this. I'm not the expert on charter schools that some people are. I know probably a little bit more than some, but FCF doesn't, these four people don't run the schools day to day. They contract out to an education service management company to run the schools. And that company is Charter Schools USA, CSUSA again. They run all 11 of FCF schools. So these two groups are really deeply intertwined. And when we say that the applicant is a nonprofit educational foundation, that kind of gives you the warm and fuzzy feeling that this is a charity doing a public service, a good for the community. And in reality, they're basically just a face on CSUSA. How independent are they? It's really hard to say. That is the sort of thing I'd be trying to untangle on this. If they're really just, a couple of people, a figurehead, and CSUSA is really calling all the shots, is deciding where to put the schools, deciding what to do, where to cherry pick students, and so on. And FCF is just the pretty nonprofit face on the thing. I was thinking this last night. What would be a parallel to explain this? Let's say me, Dave Gulliver, I wanted to open a food kitchen in Sarasota to serve the public, to help people have food. And so I create a charity and, the county says, great, Dave, we're really happy you're running a food kitchen. And then I turn around and just go to McDonald's to buy all the hamburgers and dish them out. And really every McDonald's is doing all the work. That's kind of what this feels like to me. Is that normal? I don't know. But these are the questions I'd be trying to decipher as we go through this.
Yeah. So let's, we're at the very beginning of the overview. This is from the Florida Charter Educational Foundation. So everyone's talking about Charter Schools USA, but the reality is, and we need our local news to get better, I agree, at really looking at who this group is. They plan to open in 2025, 26. And they are saying that they're going to have an enrollment of 885 K through 10, kindergarten through 10th grade students. Ultimately, they want to do K-12 in year one and increase to 1,235 K-12 students by year 5. So we're going to look at enrollment numbers, but you and I both look at that and go, that's pretty optimistic, wouldn't you say?
Yes.
Yeah.
As we've said, there are so many pieces of information here. I can see this conversation going in many different directions right now. But yeah, that's optimistic. That's,
very optimistic. And the thing is, it's the Welland Park College Preparatory Academy is a Charter USA school in Sarasota County that has greatly underperformed in terms of enrollment, and we'll get to that. The location of the proposed school is located east of I-75 on Fruitville Road. It's I believe 8175 Fruitville Road or 8715. Anyway, it is the address of the current private school the Classical Academy. And I gotta say, because, one of the buzzwords that was used at the school board meeting by Tim Enos and others, well, mainly Mr. Enos, I guess, is this idea, competition is good, competition is good.
Mhm.
And when Tom Edwards asked about the relationship between the Classical Academy private school and this application, it was actually Bridget Ziegler, whose kids go to the Classical Academy, that jumped in and answered the question, which I found inappropriate. She's not the applicant.
Right.
Shouldn't be speaking for the applicant. There's going to be questions about a conflict of interest. Should she even be voting on this? And I got to tell you, if you're really competitors, I would not be happy about somebody using the name Classical Academy and opening another school. That's just
Right.
pretty basic. And so you got to ask the question, are they actually coordinating? And that
Yeah.
was the answer. She jumped in to say, no, there's no coordination. And I got to tell you, watching development applications change over time in this county, I don't see any reason why down the road they wouldn't go, oh, we've decided to merge.
Right.
That's my opinion.
I think we both spotted that. It's too much of a coincidence that we have a classical academy here in Sarasota, a private school, and now the major charter school operation in the state, one of the biggest in the country, says, oh, we're going to open Sarasota Classical Preparatory Academy right here in Sarasota at the same address that the current classical academy is at. That's asking us to suspend an awful lot of disbelief. And I've been kicking this around in my head for a couple of days now about what the motivation could be. I mean, if you were, let's say you were going to open a pizza place, and would you open your pizza place literally right around the corner from another pizza place serving the exact same kind of pizza? I don't think there's any reason on earth you would do that unless you know that the other pizza place is closing, or you've already got a merger deal on the books, or you think you've got some sort of advantage that's going to drive them out of business.
Yeah.
And so one of those three things has got to be happening here. And you pointed out before the big enrollment numbers right out of the gate. And that sounds to me, and yes, like you said, they missed the enrollment numbers by 50%. They're 100% over on their guess at Welland Park. The only way you're going to hit those big numbers right out of the gate is basically if you absorb another school. I don't see any way on earth that they could fill. I mean, the K-12 or the K-5 is as big as any elementary school in the county, virtually, aside from Ashton, I think. So this really smells like there's a merger on the books. And when you think about it, I mean, if you've got the two pizza places, we'll go back to that just for a second. Right now, Classical Academy, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, Cathy, but Classical Academy is a private school, correct?
Yes. Oh, yes.
And they charge a fairly large tuition. If I remember, it's several $1,000s a year.
Well, I believe it's now 8, which is the the voucher amount.
Right. So, and they're teaching what they call this classical curriculum, which you've mentioned earlier in our conversation, and we'll probably talk more about that later. And classical prep, the new charter that's applied to be here, is teaching the exact same curriculum.
Yes.
So, again, you've got two things, the exact same style, but Classical Academy is charging several $1,000s a year. Classical prep is going to be a charter school where basically it's state funding and people are going there more or less for free. And that, how is traditional Classical Academy going to compete with a school offering the exact same education model for free? There's got to be a merger in the works here. One of them's got to be folding or completely changing its model or something like that. So that's a huge question that I think, the school board's got to answer and respond to as it reviews this application.
Yeah. So the educational plan here, the application proposes a classical education framework combined with the Charter Schools USA education model. The classical education framework consists of trivium. Okay, and I just want to give the definition of trivium because I had to actually look that one up. And it is based on the educational model in medieval universities. I'm not making that up, but it's grammar, logic, and rhetoric. And,
Right.
at the time, I actually did a master's thesis that touched on this for my divinity degree, but rhetoric was a highly prized, talent in those days. And you can imagine there was no internet. So the, public speaking and the ability to be involved in public speaking effectively, to do that is a large part of the curriculum. I'll go back to that trivium. It's the lower division of the seven liberal arts in medieval schools, consisting of grammar, logic, and rhetoric. And one of the criticisms of the school that I've seen on Google reviews is the lack of technology education, and that some parents are very concerned that their kids were behind
Mhm.
because they weren't getting that kind of an education. So, that's something else for us to consider. So they have this very particular classical charter education model, which is affiliated with Hillsdale College, which I don't know if you saw this. I'd like to pull this up later, or it might have been some of my research. I saw that one of the schools was a Vermilion school. Did you come across?
Really? No.
Okay. You've got the organizational plan, and there's a reference. College preparatory academy at Welland Park is managed by the same governing board, the Florida
Mhm.
Charter Education Foundation, located in Fort Lauderdale. To your point about who does what, they talk
Mhm.
about what FCEF is going to do, and they select the educational service. ESP here stands for Educational Services Provider. They
Yep.
perform oversight, but a lot of this just seems rather squishy to me. They're
Mhm.
not involved in the day-to-day functioning of the school.
No.
Um, the application says Charter Schools USA currently manages 64 schools in Florida. Actually, I've found that there's only 60 on their website. I don't know
Mhm.
what that other 4 are. And anyway, I'm just gonna scroll down. They have a business plan. Okay, this is important. One bus. And Robin
Right.
Brunelli highlighted this. And you know what? We need to take a quick break. Everybody, you're listening to The Detail on WSLR 96.5 LPFM in Sarasota, Florida. Programming at WSLR is supported by listeners like you and by Ringling College Galleries and Exhibitions. Ringling College's 2023-24 exhibition season features art from Ringling students, alumni, faculty, and nationally recognized artists from a wide range of mediums and from diverse backgrounds. More information is available at ringlingcollege.gallery. So one bus, and some of the evaluation of this application by the review committee talks about that is a way, only one bus for a school east of I-75 is going to keep kids who don't have parents able to transport them from being able to attend. And I would argue this is a structural way that they, kick a roadblock, I would say, perhaps intentionally, to make sure that the student population that they get is of
Mhm.
a certain economic background.
Right. And we should briefly tip our caps to the reviewers, the analysts we don't know inside the school board offices or the district offices, because they did a very strong review. They pointed out things that I didn't pick up on.
Yeah.
Granted, spending more time on it than I did, but they did a really good job noting some of these things. And clearly, if you don't have school buses, you have one bus to serve 1,200 kids,
Mhm.
and there's no way that bus can cover any sort of ground in Sarasota traffic, getting out from under 75 back and forth, it's going to be west of 75. So they're not going to be serving the underserved populations. And our analysts rightly pointed out that they're projecting the classical prep here is projecting 46% free and reduced lunch students, which is the
Mhm.
with the way you kind of get at how many students are from low income families. There's
Mhm.
no way you're going to get 46% of these students from low income families when you only have one bus. Everybody's driving them. Everybody's going to be driving their kids to school, and those are not your low income families with a single wage earner or two people have to go to work every day.
Right.
And our analysts spotted that right off the bat, which I'll give them
Yeah.
credit for that. That's a very good pickup.
Yeah.
Um,
It's important, and I want to just show some of the data from Welland Park, because this is the classical or charter schools USA, what's going on with Welland Park enrollment. They projected like 600 children, over 600.
615 in the first year, and they only got 259. So they were off by half. They didn't even hit half of their projected number.
Yeah. Welland Park ethnicity is a vast majority white school.
Mhm.
It is, I want to say it's like roughly 75%.
Mhm.
And then if you look at the economic status of kids in Welland Park, who's economically disadvantaged,
Mhm. Yeah.
you know, in Welland Park, which didn't meet their enrollment numbers by a vast amount, at least 300 kids under what they projected out of 600 and change. The economic status, where most kids in Sarasota County, or half the children, roughly half the children in Sarasota County, are on a free and reduced lunch. East of I-75, that number drops to around 31%. In Welland Park, only 18% of the kids are economically disadvantaged. So again, going to Valora Cole's claim, her implied
Right.
claim that charter schools actually do better because the school does better, I challenge her with, you're cherry picking your kids. That's why,
Right.
you have to demonstrate that those kids are performing better because of your school, not because
Right.
you're cherry picking your student population.
Mhm.
And I wanted to just share also, Dave, the rate of closures with charter schools. This is data that a comprehensive report took a look at, plus WTSP. So I'm see, the state doesn't show their closure numbers on the
Mhm.
website. It's not easy to find at all.
Right.
So I had to go digging for those. There are 726 charter schools currently operating in the state of Florida. Not all of those are corporate. We've got Sarasota School of Arts and Sciences. We've
Mhm.
got Sarasota Military Academy. So you've got the homegrown charters, but you've also got the corporate charters. 726 in the 2022-23 school year, according to the state. There have been 409 charter school closures from the beginning of, the late 90s up until 2019. So that's not an inclusive number. It leaves out 2020, 21, 22, and 23. 409 have closed, which puts the failure rate or the closure rate of charter schools at 36%.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah. I mean, who would tolerate a failure rate of 36%?
Right.
And these are kids. So these schools close, and there's great articles about the disruption to children's lives when a charter school closes and they
Yeah.
have to scurry and find another place to go to school. So this has happened in Florida at a rate of 36%. I know, Jefferson County Public Schools closed in 20, well, they didn't, the charter bailed, right? And this was Academica. The charter bailed. I would count that as a charter closure because they bailed. They may not count that. So, so with Ms. Cole's claim that charter schools perform better, which she doesn't back up with data, I would ask her, you got to look at the total context. I want to know how many of your schools failed. Public schools don't close most of the time if they're failing. They keep
Right.
So again, you've got to adjust your data for closures. And Florida's not doing that. Florida is not working the closure number into the mix. The other thing, if you look at historically, the denial rate of charter school applications, there's a clear history of, an average denial rate in the high 40s or about 50% at least. It's become a greater approval rate in the past few years. But now that the state can override the local school boards, you've got a very worrying dynamic. But historically, school boards are on firm footing and should be able to go to the state and say, look, we can't say yes to everyone. I'm curious about your take on this Florida Charter School Commission and the impact on good decision making.
Well, on the one hand, it's ironic because, this is the invention of a conservative Republican administration in Tallahassee. And the irony is that, for decades, going back to Reagan, one of the tenets, and we'll get to that in a second, one of the tenets of Republican philosophy was the federalism movement, which is the kind of inaptly named movement of giving control to localities. And here they're turning around and saying, yeah, we'll give control to localities, except when you don't do what we want you to do, we're going to take that away and we're going to approve it ourselves. In other words, you know best as long as what you know best agrees with what we want. And, if what you know best doesn't agree, then we're going to overrule you and do it our way. I wasn't aware of this commission until I started researching this, and I noticed what you'd written about it. So this is stunning to me. I did not see this coming at all. I guess they approved this, it was either October 22 or 23. So this is
No,
a
it
fairly
was the last legislative session in 2023.
Yeah, so
What I
that's,
know about it. And, it is, I call it kneecapping local governments. You got Manny Diaz, who was an executive with Academica in charge of education. Talk about the fox guarding the hen house. How can this man be objective? It's ridiculous. And now they have this new commission where, Charter Schools USA, which has given money to Corcoran, to Gruters, to Diaz, to the Republican Party of Florida. Now they're going to go in front of a state commission to appeal if they get denied. What are the chances that, it's insane. And the local school board's on the hook for legal fees. They're running it like the mob. It's nuts,
Yeah.
So this is the this is the overview, the evaluation done by that committee, which again, props to the committee. They did a great job. And I thought actually this might be their mistake, that when they talk about the educational mission, it says Sarasota Classical Preparatory Academy's mission and vision is clearly aligned with the tenets of classical education. Clearly, yeah. Go ahead.
This is what caught my eye right out of the gate. And the reason I think we're talking today is, when you're a reporter and even when you're just, an average citizen, you read these things, and when something jumps out at you as an egregious mistake, it makes you question whether the application is serious or not. And, I would love to discuss that at more length with you, but just right off the bat, I'll read from, this is the executive summary. This is page 1 of the entire application. SCPA, Sarasota Classical Preparatory Academy's mission is to educate scholars through key tenets, TENANTS, of classical education. The word they're looking for there is not tenant, which, I think everybody knows is somebody who pays rent to live somewhere. It's tenant, which is a philosophical point. And they get that wrong. And these are educators, and this is literally their mission statement, and they can't get that right. And when somebody can't get the most basic things right, I mean, if you got a mistake like that on a cover letter or a resume and you're a hiring executive at a company, you would drop it in the trash. I
Yeah,
would.
they're in the circular file.
They're these are educators and they can't get the most important word in their mission statement right. I would drop this thing, like you said, on a circular file right off the bat. The next sentence says through instruction in grammar. Well, guys, this isn't grammar, this is vocabulary, but it's close enough. You're
Yeah,
literally making the case that you don't know how to do what you say you're doing. And this wasn't just a one-off, as we were going back and forth previously, Cathy, they made this mistake 7 times in the first 50 pages of this document, and then I stopped counting. They botched their mission statement and just cut and pasted all through this application. And if we have time, I would love to go through and show some other ways where this application is just looks like it's put in by people who are not serious about education. It's full of mistakes, as our friends at the county schools committee pointed out. There are many they pointed out. There are some we spotted. This is just a mess. I cannot
yeah.
believe somebody had the gall to drop this in the hopper and say, take us seriously as an applicant.
Yeah. Yeah. And we don't have that much time left, but you and I may take our conversation over like an overtime because there is so much to unpack here. But again, the facility location in the evaluation done by the committee, it says the Classical Academy is operating out of the church at the proposed location for the new Sarasota Preparatory Classical Academy Charter School, 8751 Fruitville Road, Sarasota. The existing private school has plans for a 1,310 student K through 12 and to move to Grace Church campus on Bee Ridge Road. There's a development application that, the residents nearby would say got railroaded through, and their concerns about whether it's appropriate to have a school at that location. They filed a lawsuit actually
Wow.
against the county. So it's unclear that the Classical Academy is going to be able to make that move or to make it in the time frame that they would like to make it. And looking at the market dynamics here, because the application says they will pull from other areas outside of Sarasota County. There's a Lakewood Ranch Preparatory Academy that was opened by Charter Schools USA. So in terms of the competition factor, I got to wonder if this is really a merger because the market dynamics don't make sense. It looks like cannibalization, not
Yes.
competition.
And as you said earlier, it wouldn't be the first time that somebody said, oh, we're planning this move, this new development, and then poof, it disappears when the real plan emerges, which was a merger right off the bat.
Right. And when I see Bridget Ziegler jumping in to answer questions for me, that's not a good sign. I don't like, because she's a proponent of the classical model. She was the person who tried to sneak Vermillion in outside of correct process at the Sarasota County School Board. Her reassurances that these two things are separate do nothing. Here you've got that demographic where the committee says you got the math wrong to the applicant. The number of kids on a free or reduced lunch that you're saying, they basically it's a measure of economic disadvantaged kids. This Charter Schools USA, Florida Charter Education Foundation says it'll be at 46% free and reduced lunch, but they're saying that's very unlikely. In that area, it's only 31%. What do you think about these numbers for their enrollment? Is there anything you want to add here?
I haven't actually watched the meeting, but I've seen notes from other people who watched it. And I believe our superintendent, O'Connor, actually pointed out that those kindergarten numbers don't make a lot of sense. Tatum Ridge is a successful school. It's out there. It's got a long history. Their principal's been there a long time. And it's a very good school. And I can't imagine a case where a lot of people, there's going to be some sort of mass exodus from Tatum Ridge to fill this school. That doesn't really pass muster as far as I can tell.
The other thing he said about Tatum Ridge was They
Mhm.
have very robust mental health services and
Yes.
behavioral services at Tatum Ridge. And he was saying, I don't see that in your application. That's an issue.
Right. I think people noted that I think this classical prep is saying they'll have four ESE teachers for the entire 1,200 students, which and they say things so dryly. Like, this does not seem realistic. No, it doesn't. Four ESE teachers for 1,200 people. In the application, they say they're going to have two counselors on staff at the school. And that number stays constant even as the population grows from 800 to 1,200. So does that mean you're going to add 400 kids who have no need for counseling services whatsoever, even
Mhm.
as the ones they add later are going to be the high school students who probably have more pressures and more,
Yeah.
issues to deal with. And so they're not taking that seriously either. And as we know, that's a huge deal for students today. You need to have those support services in place, and they don't seem to be making a commitment to that.
Getting to this interview, and I thought this was a very good catch and an important catch, as I know you do too, by the review committee. It says the application reports that high school students will participate in an interview process, which includes questions about values and beliefs. What standard does the school use to identify correct values and beliefs? What if the student expresses values that are incongruent with the school's values? The head of this Florida Charter Education Foundation is clearly, by her own description, a prophetic voice, and she has a very strong religious position. This is a Hillsdale College curriculum, affiliated this classical model. What's going on, right?
Yeah, it's interesting because if you look at it in combination with the statement, that's in the application several times, that we will not discriminate on basis of gender, race, religion, and so on. So they're saying religion is not one of these values we consider. But if you do an interview like this, that kind of
Mhm.
raises the question if it gives you a kind of a stealth way to address religion. We're not going to discriminate on basis of religion. However, little Johnny doesn't seem to believe in the Ten Commandments. He steals or he lies sometimes, or and that's our excuse. He doesn't agree with, his life doesn't align with our values. It's just really a stealth way of saying he's not a Christian. Possibly. I don't know. That's the sort of thing, again, as a reporter that you really want to dig up. I would be going to, let's face it, this is CS or Charter Schools USA's thing. I'd say, okay, can we see a copy of this interview? Our school board should be demanding that, frankly. We should say, okay, you're interviewing students. We want to see that interview document and then hold them to it in the
Right.
future. They're spelling out so much detail of everything else they do here. Then why don't we? Why you should be spelling out this interview thing too.
Mhm.
Um,
Because it says, how does the school measure virtue development? Because that's another thing. When it's so much a centerpiece, these become important questions. And are you actually intentionally or unintentionally creating an environment where these kids are going to feel ostracized if they don't buy into
right.
everything, right? Or if they have a different religion or approach to the same religion. So is there this coercive environment being created? uh, I don't know how you get around that, but I think it's a great point that you make. This interview shouldn't be a mystery. We need to see what it is.
Yeah. And it needs to be kind of audited going forward too, because frankly, one of the sayings in journalism is, if your mother says she loves you, you check it out. They might provide you with the interview document. Then I would be finding out, is this actually the interview questions they asked you? I'd be going back to that after the fact. This is something you'd want to track going forward. And frankly, if there's one thing education does better than anything else, probably even better than educating students, it's keeping data. So they're going to have data,
Mhm.
right down to the, how people part their hair. You would be able to see patterns The other thing that was interesting in the application for me, and this is on page 505 of the 600 odd page application. This is the application that a parent would fill out, or a guardian, if they wanted their child to attend this classical prep school. I'm not sure what page of the PDF it is, Kathy, but it's document page 505 in the bottom right-hand corner.
Mhm.
And right above where the parent or guardian would sign the application, it says this: as a proud member of the Charter Schools USA family, we believe all parents should have a choice in their child's education, that all children deserve access to a quality education. That's fine, of course you do. We look forward to sharing information with you regarding changes in legislation or other factors that could impact the educational environment or a parent's right to choose. We may also call upon you to help us communicate the importance of putting students first. If you translate that into plain English, it's basically, if there's any legislation that might attack charter schools, we expect you to step up and lobby for our school. And it's fine if you believe in your school to advocate for it. It's a whole nother thing to put the statement right above where you sign the application, where you're trying to get your kid into the school, and basically sign and say, yeah, sure, I will step up and lobby for you publicly if you tell me to. That's coercive. And I would have a problem with that statement being in an application.
Yeah. So we just have a few minutes left. We are going to go over, and you can catch the rest of this conversation on YouTube. But I want to end it with, Charter Schools USA promised, and now I can show you the graphic and get the specific numbers, that Welland Park College Preparatory Academy at Welland Park was going to bring in 615 students in year one. Only 259 enrolled, an over projection of 356 students. That's an underperformance of 58% with Welland Park College Preparatory Academy at Welland Park. And the reviewers actually note that the applicants used the wrong map to determine which students would be within a 20-minute drive.
Oh, that was hysterical, wasn't it? I
Yeah.
looked up that map. That
Well,
map is from South Carolina.
oh,
They dropped in, I mean, that's another sign that it's really Charter Schools USA that wrote and developed and turned in this application, because they operate schools in South Carolina. So when they created this application, they just got sloppy. They dropped in a map from one of their other applications and tried to pass it off as Florida, probably by accident. I can't imagine they would think people wouldn't notice that. But it's just another sign of sloppiness of the application, and that they don't have the data to support, the assertions they're making.
yeah. And on that note, everybody, we're going to wrap it up with a 58% underperformance in enrollment at the College Preparatory Academy at Welland Park, and with at least 36% failure rate, closure rate of charter schools in Florida. It seems like our school board really needs to take this very seriously. There's a lot of holes in this application. Dave Gulliver, thanks for walking through this with me. You and I will continue. And everybody, thank you so much for listening. You've been listening to The Detail on WSLR 96.5, LPFM in Sarasota, Florida. Programming at WSLR is supported by listeners like you and by Ringling College Galleries and Exhibitions. Ringling College's 2023-24 exhibition season features art from Ringling students, alumni, faculty, and nationally recognized artists from a wide range of mediums and from diverse backgrounds. More information is available at ringlingcollege.gallery. Thank you so much for listening. Be sure to stay tuned for more public affairs programming here on WSLR. Make it a great day.